I am not actually live with you this morning. I am pre-recording this. A couple extra meetings popped up for me this week. One of which is at 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, and I can't be on two different meetings at the same time. So I have to, I pre-recorded this one. I do prefer when I'm able to do it live. We can have better interaction, but I didn't want you to completely miss out on it. Also, Thursday, I have another meeting that's a conflict, so I won't be able to do Thursday. But that's why I wanted to do this recorded of the one, so that you can at least get one. Now, yes, PB reads the Bible. What is that? I'm PB. I'm Pastor Brian, pastor at Christ United Methodist Church. And this is our small group where we gather together, we share life. Excuse me. I read from the Bible, you follow along in your own or listen, and then I share some commentary. I share some thoughts on what passages mean, and sometimes what a particular word means, to help understand it a little bit better. So I appreciate you being able to take time to do this with me. Excuse me. And uh, continue, even though I'm not live with you, please let me know that you joined in. I will go back in and look to see who's been here. I don't keep attendance, but mostly I want to see what you're saying, what it is that you're connecting with, if you have a question or a comment, and what it is you want me and others to keep in prayer. That's important stuff for us to do with you. Back there. Interesting. All right. So, my friends, I'm going to get right to it because I'm only allowed half an hour with Restream when we do this kind of a thing. So we are on First Kings chapter 22. It's the last chapter of First Kings. When we come back next week, Tuesday of next week, we will be we're jumping right into Second Kings. We're just going to finish up the two kings. So first Kings first, right? First Kings first. And so we're going to read chapter 22. For 3 years, Aram and Israel continued without war, but in the third year, King Jehoshaphat of Judah came down to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said to his servants, "Do you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us, yet we are doing nothing to take it out of the hand of the king of Aram?" He said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead?" Jehoshaphat replied to the king of Israel, "I am as you are, my people are your people, my horses are your horses." But Jehoshaphat also said to the king of Israel, "Inquire first for the word of Yahweh." Pause. So Aram is another name for Syria. So he's talking about Syria. We turn our minds back a couple chapters to the one of the battles, the invasion, the battles. Aram was the place, was the group of people in the kingdom that Ahab and the northern kingdom of Israel were fighting against. And Ben-Hadad was the king of the Arameans of Aram, of Syria. And that's the one that Ahab negotiated a peace treaty with. Part of that peace treaty, or an add-on to the treaty, it wasn't part of the peace treaty, but it was an add-on by Ben-Hadad, was that he was going to give land back to Israel that his father had taken. Presumably that's this Ramoth Gilead area. Not presumably, it was. And the interesting thing, apparently it's been 3 years since that took place, and they still haven't gotten the land. So now Ahab is going to break his own peace treaty, the one that he created. That's kind of the irony here, and attack Syria, Aram, to make it happen. At the same time, now apparently there's peace between the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, and Jehoshaphat has come down to Israel to meet with the king. And while he's there, the king says, "Will you go to war with me?" Well, uh, Judah kind of doesn't, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, kind of doesn't have a choice. He almost has to go along with it. He probably came into the peace. He probably negotiated a peace with Ahab in the first place because of almost outright necessity. Israel's forces, presumably much larger, a lot more people. And so he says, sure, well, I'll go along with you. I don't really have a choice, so I will. But talk to God first. Let's see what Yahweh has to say about it. So, picking up from there, verse 6. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 of them, and said to them, shall I go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? Pause. Notice what's said here. Also notice what's not said here. It does not say that they are the prophets of God, of Yahweh. They're just prophets. And that number 400 is kind of important and special. We will turn our brains back a few extra chapters to when Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal. And in that story, we were told that there were 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. That story doesn't give us a whole lot of detail, and we're not 100% sure, well, which prophets were killed, which ones were all there. Was it only the Baal prophets that were there, or was it the Baal and the Asherah prophets that were all together in that little battle and debacle? Based on the fact that here it says 400, we might think, well, okay, so it was the 450 Baal prophets that were all killed that day, and the Asherah prophets, that must be who's left. That's possible. That's possible. And so, but it's specific. It's specific in its lack of specificity. It does not say prophets of Yahweh. Picking up from there, they said, go up, for Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king. How do they know, right? But Jehoshaphat said, is there no other prophet of Yahweh here of whom we may inquire? Pause. That's how the NRSV translates it. The NIV says, is there not a prophet of Yahweh here? That's a closer to, that's a more accurate translation of the Hebrew. The way the NRSV translates it almost sounds like he thinks, well, maybe these are real prophets, but isn't there one more? Whereas the NIV, I think, is a little more clear in saying, isn't there a prophet of Yahweh left that we can speak to? Now, how does Ahab reply? Picking up from there, the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is still one other by whom we may inquire of Yahweh, Micaiah, son of Imlah, but I hate him, for he never prophesies anything favorable about me, but only disaster. Pause. He's outright lying, right? Because when he says there's only one, Elijah and Elisha are both still around, as are presumably the 100 prophets that were saved by Obadiah. This guy might have been one of them, but that would still leave 99 others, plus Elijah and Elisha. So he's outright lying. But there's only one. There's only one. Picking up, Jehoshaphat said, let the king not say such a thing. Then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, bring quickly Micaiah, son of Imlah. Now the king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah were sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their robes, at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria. And all the prophets were prophesying before them. Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, made for himself horns of iron, and he said, thus says Yahweh, with these you shall gore the Arameans until they are destroyed. All the prophets were prophesying the same and saying, go up to Ramoth Gilead and triumph. Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king. Pause. So they're doing this in a very public place, this threshing floor right at the city gates. City gates are extremely important. That's where like business takes place and all that. And they're doing it a threshing floor right there. It's a very public spectacle. The two kings are, on thrones. They brought the thrones out there to this. They've got them arrayed head to toe in their fancy robes and all that stuff. He's putting on a show. He's got all the 400 prophets there bouncing around, doing whatever they're doing. He wants it to be a public spectacle. And when I say he, Ahab, wants it to be a public spectacle. He's trying to drum up support for his war. He's trying to drum up support for his war. And this prophet Zedekiah made horns of iron. Think of, like bull horns and stuff. They're symbol of strength. And what he did by making them, it's a prophetic sign. It's a physical representation of the prophecy, connected to the prophecy. And in making it, it's the ancient belief anyway, is in the making of it and presenting of it begins the prophecy, like executes the prophecy. Gets it started. Okay. Picking up from there. The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, "Look, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably." But Micaiah said, "As Yahweh lives, whatever Yahweh says to me, this I will speak." When he had come to the king said to him, "Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain?" He answered him, "Go up in triumph. Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king." But the king said to him, "How many times must I make you swear to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh?" Pause. I mockingly said what Micaiah said, because presumably he might have. Because something about what he said, how he said it, how he was moving when he said it, or maybe just from prior experience, the king knew he was lying, knew he wasn't giving what he really believed to be the prophecy of Yahweh. So here we go. But notice also, Micaiah hasn't said that it was the word of Yahweh. He didn't say that. Then Micaiah said, "I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep that have no shepherd. And Yahweh said, these have no master. Let each one go home in peace." Pause. Very symbolic. A couple of different reasons. The mountains, Ramoth Gilead means hilly places or something very similar to that. So saying that the sheep, the people of Israel, were scattered on the hilly places, on the mountains, because there was no shepherd. The shepherd is symbolic for king in ancient times, especially in Israel. So the king is no longer there, and the sheep are just scattered. Let them go home in peace. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy anything favorable about me, but only disaster?" Then Micaiah said, "Therefore, hear the word of Yahweh." Here we go. Now he's actually going to say the word of Yahweh. "I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven standing beside him, to the right and to the left of him. And Yahweh said, who will entice Ahab so that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" Then one said one thing and another said another, until a spirit came forward and stood before Yahweh, saying, "I will entice him." "How?" Yahweh asked him. He replied, "I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." Then Yahweh said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do it." So you see, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. Yahweh has decreed disaster for you. Pause. So it starts, and he says about being in the throne room, being in God's throne room. That's a very powerful thing. Whenever a prophet speaks about that, it's like it's extra evidence that it's a real prophecy, and that it's the real message from Yahweh. Should remind the reader, or if you haven't read it yet, but Isaiah has a very similar description of what he sees in his vision. Okay, so that's what takes place there. And we've got this thing with all the God's army is around him, all of God's spirits and stuff like that. Well, we should try this, we should do that, we should do that. One steps forward and says, I'll do it. I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets. God says, go and do it. So he's saying all these prophets are lying. The lying spirit has given this to you. Yahweh has decreed disaster for you. Continuing. 24. Then Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, came up to Micaiah, slapped him on the cheek, and said, which way did the spirit of Yahweh pass from me to speak to you? Pause. A kind of a fancy way of saying, what proof do you have that I'm lying? Which one of us is lying? Maybe it's you that's lying. Micaiah replied, you will find out on that day when you go in to hide in an inner chamber. Pause. When you go to hide away, which might remind the reader of the time when Ben-Hadad had to go into hiding from the army of Israel. The king of Israel then ordered, take Micaiah and return him to Amon, the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son, and say, thus says the king, put this fellow in prison and feed him on reduced rations of bread and water until I come in peace. Micaiah said, if you return in peace, Yahweh has not spoken by me. And he said, hear, you peoples, all of you. Saying, if you return in peace, then everything I've said is a lie. And I'm a dead man anyway. All right, picking up from there. Continuing, verse 29. So the king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah went up to Ramoth Gilead. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your robes. Pause. He's like trying to, he thinks he can trick God, basically. And, he's trying to beat God. He's trying to beat the destruction that has been decreed against him because of his evil and because of his inability or an unwillingness to follow God. He's going to do it by trying on wearing a costume and presumably trying to get King Jehoshaphat killed in his stead, right? You go out as a king and I'll go out as a soldier. Picking up. So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had commanded the 32 captains of his chariots, fight with no one, small or great, but only with the king of Israel. When the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, it is surely the king of Israel. So they turned to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out. When the captain of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. Pause. So we don't know what he cried out, what he said, but they must have realized, oh, this isn't him. And so they avoided fighting him because they've been told, don't fight anybody, not even great. I only want you to go after the king of Israel. Picking up from there, verse 34. But a certain man, pause. We don't know if this was an Aramean or an Israelite. But a certain man drew his bow and unknowingly struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. Pause. So was it an enemy or was it friendly fire? We're not told. Doesn't matter. It randomly struck him in about the only place it could to actually kill him eventually. He's wearing armor, but it struck between a piece of armor and the piece of the breastplate. One of the only openings anywhere on him is where this random arrow struck him. And without saying it, the author and the editor is saying this was directed by God. Picking up, so he said to the driver of his chariot, turn around and carry me out of the battle, for I am wounded, presumably because he wants to get medical treatment. The battle grew hot that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot facing the Arameans until at evening he died. The blood from the wound had flowed into the bottom of the chariot. Then about sunset, a shout went through the army, every man to his city and every man to his country. Pause. Very similar to what the prophecy had said about everyone going home in peace. Yes, let each one go home in peace. Every man to his country. Everyone go home. So he tried to get out of being killed. He gets struck. He tries to find. Sorry, although it's blurred, you can't see it. But he was giving me a thumbs up because I held up my thumb. Interesting stuff. Anyway, he tried to get healing, right? But instead, his battle is going on too strong. They just prop him up in his chariot until he dies. And now they all go home. What happens next? 37. So the king died and was brought to Samaria. They buried the king in Samaria. They washed the chariot by the pool of Samaria. The dogs licked up his blood, and the prostitutes washed themselves in it according to the word of Yahweh that he had spoken. Pause. The NRSV actually adds a couple words there when it says the prostitutes wash themselves in it. That in it isn't there in Hebrew. The NIV might get it closer when it puts in parentheses that this took place in a pool, parentheses, where the prostitutes bathed, end of parentheses. Excuse me. And it's speaking of a word of Yahweh that we don't have a record of. This hasn't been told in these prophecies. Now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did and the ivory house that he built and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? So Ahab slept with his ancestors, and his son Ahaziah succeeded him. I think I have time. So we're going to finish this up because there's not much. All right. So he's done. Now it's going to go. Now it goes back in time and goes to the southern kingdom. We'll find out how Jehoshaphat started. Jehoshaphat, son of Asa, began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of King Ahab of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shilhi. He walked in all the way of his father Asa. He did not turn aside from it, doing what was right in the sight of Yahweh. Yet the high places were not taken away, and the people still sacrificed and offered incense on the high places. Jehoshaphat also made peace with the king of Israel. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and his power that he showed and how he waged war, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? The remnant of the male temple prostitutes who were still in the land in the days of his father Asa, he exterminated. There was no king in Edom. A deputy was king. Jehoshaphat made ships of the Tarshish type to go to Ophir for gold, but they did not go, for the ships were wrecked at Ezion-Geber. Then Ahaziah, son of Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, "Let my servants go with your servants in the ships." But Jehoshaphat was not willing. Jehoshaphat slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of his father David. His son Jehoram succeeded him. Pause. We hear here all the good things. Mostly we hear good things about him. And there's code words in there that are connecting him to Solomon. He's doing a lot of the things that Solomon did. We're reminded of the ships he wants to build and send to Ophir, which is what Solomon did, but he's unable to do it. So he's not quite Solomon when it comes to that. But he's like his father Asa in a lot of good ways. And yes, they forgot to do this, but he did a little bit better than Asa. He killed off all the temple prostitutes. And he's compared to, he was buried in the city of his father David. He is a descendant of David. Now contrast that with the final verses, which are back to the northern kingdom. Ahaziah, son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria in the 17th year of King Jehoshaphat of Judah. He reigned 2 years over Israel. He did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh and walked in the way of his father and mother and in the way of Jeroboam ben Nebat, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin. He served Baal and worshipped him. He provoked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to anger, just as his father had done. So whereas Jehoshaphat is compared to his father Asa, and compared to Solomon, and compared to David, Ahaziah is compared to Ahab and to Jeroboam, the one who got it, the whole bad stuff started, we might say, right, for the kingdom of the north. All right, my friends, that's it. I know I was quick too. I went through that, but I had to finish it up in less than a half an hour. Pray that it's been beneficial to you as you go about your days. Keep your eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open to everything God, our living, loving, active God, is doing in your life. When you see it, when you hear it, say, thank you, God, and then tell somebody about it. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed. Bye.